Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Business of Tech session of LTX Fest 2020. My name is Roxanne Diaz, and I'll be today's moderator. Here with me, I have amazing Latinos joining me to discuss market entry, customer discovery, and growth opportunities within each industry sector. I'll allow them to introduce themselves. So Ingrid, you're on the left of my screen. Why don't you start?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ingrid Cubillos. I am a Senior Director of Product currently at Able2. Born and raised in New York, have been in product management almost my entire professional career, mostly focused on the health and wellness space. Looking forward to this panel.
Awesome. Anthony, why don't you go next?
Hi, guys. I'm Anthony Hernandez, born and raised in the Bronx. Currently, I am Senior Product Manager at Amazon, working on Prime Video.
Cool.
And I'll go next. I'm Raysana Amador. I am also born and raised in New York, but now I'm on the West Coast. And I am a Senior Product Manager at Intel, working in our IoT group, focusing on emerging technology for software.
Cool. Raysana, I love how you pronounce your name, Raysana Hurtado Amador.
No other way to say it.
Yeah. And just so everybody knows, like I'm based in Boston, and I am Peruvian, born and raised. Ingrid, I forgot if you mentioned where you were. I know you were from New York, but what about your background?
My family's from Colombia originally.
Cool. Mm-hmm. What about you, Anthony?
Parents from the Dominican Republic.
Awesome.
But also I can't claim New York City anymore. I keep forgetting I'm now in Miami. I'm a Miami guy now.
Raysana, what about you?
And my mother is from Cuba and my father is from Spain.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I think the first question that I want to ask is just, we're all product managers here. I think we've all have similar and different ways that we got to product management. But first, I guess how would you explain product management and what you do to your abuelita, to your abuelito, to your tias, tios? I'd love to hear that because it's very hard for me to explain what I do to my family. So anybody wants to?
I'll take a first stab at it. So I've actually struggled with this for a long, long time too. So I 100% can sympathize. So the way I've gotten around to it now, and I think it's a pretty good analogy for me, is I tell people product managers are to sort of contractors or architects as engineers are to sort of the construction workers, the engineers at a field, right? So the way I kind of explain it to like a Theo or a grandma is I'll say, let's say you want a house built, right? I don't know anything about welding. I know nothing about electricity. I could barely fix a pipe if we got in trouble. But what my skill is sort of getting things in order and sort of prioritizing things so that the construction job gets started correctly. We get all the permits, we get everything done correctly. And then we also have a launch product. But before that work begins, that's where sort of the differences between sort of building a home and a product manager sort of take place. I work really, really hard to make sure, should this house be built here? Is a house the best solution? Should it be an apartment building? Should it have a pool? Should it 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom? I really make sure I understand who's going to be in that house. So that once we get to work around building that house, the house fits perfectly or at least close to perfect. And I build enough wiggle room so that in case the house is a 2-bedroom, it needs to be a 3-bedroom, that can be done. Or if it needs to be a 1 floor and a 2 floor, it can be done that way. So usually that's the way I'll kind of start off the analogy. They'll pepper me with 20 questions in, but as long as I kind of couch it around house building, they're kind of fine. The minute I start talking to them about Jira and backlogs, I lost them, game over. But I've gotten away with it so far.
Yeah. Raysana or Ingrid, do you have any other additional comments or any other analogies? I think that's a great one, by the way. And the struggle is
taking that. So good.
Yeah, I think an additional kind of role is of translator. So understanding the business and translating it to an engineering team, and as well as translating the engineering team's discussions to the business operations. So,
yeah. Like speaking of translator, do you think your culture or family background has prepped you for this role and has made you a great product manager?
Definitely on the organization keeping people focused on something, keeping things moving, has definitely benefited me.
Yeah, and calming everyone down, making sure that one team is seeing trying to have consensus between different teams and trying to reach different goals. It's interesting that, Ingrid, you said you've always been a product manager, and Anthony, I think you're fairly new to product management, and I'd love to hear everyone's journeys on how you got to product management, because it's definitely not a straight line, at least not in my experience and what I've heard from other peers. So I'd love for you to share a bit of your own journey.
Sure. I started off, I transferred into product management in one of my earliest jobs at WebMD. So I came into WebMD as a producer, where I basically coordinated the production of content for the medscape.com site. And we used proprietary publishing software. And as I became more knowledgeable about the platform and about publishing needs and future wants for the business, I started owning that platform, that application. And that's how I transitioned from producer into product management, owning that application, the enhancements and iterations of it.
And I got here taking the long route. I took for the New Yorkers in the room, I did not take the express train here. I did not take the 4 train. I did not take the A train. I took the local. So I started off my career in sales. And so from sales, I went into advertising, marketing technology. I actually worked at an agency for a bit. I did some consulting for a bit as an intern, but then it kind of became sort of a full-time role for a bit. And then I ended up at a startup, and at a startup, I transitioned from account management to business development. So I did a decent amount of time sort of doing business development and working with partnership deals. And then after that, I ended up sort of in this weird partnership deal, sort of help stand up a product or a startup product in the beginning. That's sort of my first formal introduction to the PM role. The person on the other side of the shop was basically saying, hey, we've built this technology and we're not seeing traction, do something about it. So I think that's how I naturally got interested in product management, which was, hey, I think this is the priority, this is what the customer needs. And then the PM was sort of going in different directions. I started getting really frustrated, and I was like, who is this guy and what does this person do all day? Obviously, this person does not have an understanding of the market. And so this started happening around 2012. And so I got really interested in the role, and I really couldn't kind of break in at the time. And so I actually eventually ended up leaving that company. I was at Google for a bit, and I got my first PM role at a startup, sort of helping them build their technology stack and hiring up the engineering team. This was about 2016. And so I've been taking a bunch of these various roles and PMing over the last couple of years. I had a little bit of a taste of it in Google, but I really didn't have the formal role until 2016. But that's how I started, from sort of sales to sort of sales consultant, business development, and then finally ending up being the person who doesn't actually understand what the customer needs and is just throwing darts at a board.
Yeah, and mine is also not a very thought out plan to product management. I started my career at a company called Ali Corp in New York, which is funding, and it funds companies and it creates companies. And at that time, I was working on business development for a company called Gilt Group. And then, which was a fashion company. I loved fashion. I wanted to get into that field, being in New York, and I loved creativity. So got into the side of how you make product. And I did product management for garments and footwear for about 8 years in Manhattan. And then thought I wanted something else with my life, and got my MBA. And there I learned a lot of what I use now as a product manager. I did not know that, but I was learning a lot of design thinking, building a company. And then got into a rotation program at Intel. And I did it because of a passion that I have in education and changing how education works and innovating. And I thought, what better sector than technology? Let me learn a lot about the sector through a rotation program. Intel gave me that opportunity. And there I started off in industrial IoT. I didn't even know what that was. Doing strategy and business development. Then I did product management for education, building PCs. And then landed where I am now in product management for IoT. But I took the role because it was around software, and everything that I had learned at Intel was hardware driven. and I wanted to be challenged, less so than the job. I never was like, oh, product management is something that I really want, even though it's very sexy here in the Valley. It was more, how can I learn more about a sector that, or learn more about technology so I can bring it back to education. So mine has always been cored on, what do I want to do with my life and change the world? And somehow product management has fit in that right now. I don't know what the future will be, but that's how I ended up in product as a product manager.
I feel like I see a pattern in our stories, because I also didn't even know what product management was. I didn't know what I was doing was product management, but it sounds like what my mom usually says about, like, if you cannot get in through the door, like, you get in through the window. And so, like, we all somehow like managed to get in the house. And I think I trust that we're all like great product managers. And also, like, what I heard was that about your different experiences, how they shaped you into the great product manager that you are. Like, there's sales, there's like knowing the domain expertise, learning the frameworks. And I heard Anthony mention customer needs and wants, and how you have to, like, sometimes like be on the ground to really learn what the customers want and need. So I guess on that, I'll dive in a little bit deeper and talk, I want to talk about like customer discovery. How do you go about in your particular industry sectors around discovering what customers want versus what they actually need? Because I think there's like some science and art in that, and I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, there's definitely the qualitative and the quantitative side when it comes to customer research, customer requirements gathering. For me, it's been that combination of in user interviews, understanding any particular topic or area market we're trying to go into, or feature we're trying to build, as well as the data aspect. So there's what people tell you, and then there's what people actually do. So using the data to support or to really show how people either interact with a site, dig into information, the decision-making steps that they take online, and just bringing both sides together to create the complete picture of what the objective or what the job to get done is to create a successful experience for your user.
I also agree. I think one of the best ways I sort of get my hand around sort of what the customer experience is sort of living it as much as I can, if possible. If you're working on sort of a consumer-facing product, just going in there and just trying to do the regular flow. I love anecdotal stories, so I love when I can sort of listening in on users, either through customer service, either making calls about what issues they're struggling with, or reaching out to your most your most engaged users, or your users that are sort of tend to churn more, and sort of sitting with them and understanding what is it about the service that you're struggling with or not understanding. How could we improve it? Why did you leave our competitor? I love talking to sales teams and saying, oh, we just lost somebody. Who did we lose? Like, who did we lose? Do we have a good relationship with them? Would love to get on the phone with that person, or have a quick sort of Zoom call and understand whatever their experience is. So I love getting hands-on time with the consumer, because there's nothing better than that. But then the other part of it too is also putting hooks in whatever it is that you're building to sort of see what the users are doing. Because 100% Ingrid, like, users tell you a lot of stuff, and then their behaviors are worlds and planets apart. So I'm a big fan too of A/B testing, and and a lot of times when we're sort of standing up a product, I usually from the beginning start saying, what can we do to sort of implement really smart and sharp, lightweight A/B testing, so we could rapidly test and iterate on things. Like, I don't want us to have to wait 4 or 5 or 6 iterations or sprints later to decide to do something. Like, let's just do micro tests, right? Like, I'm a big fan of, in God we trust, everyone else brings me data, right? So like, yeah, okay, let's have a 5-week debate whether the button should be blue or purple, or why don't we just test it day 1 and just see what that looks like in 2 weeks. And then let's test another iteration in 2 weeks after that. And let's constantly test. So yeah, 100% agreement.
Yeah. I love what you said about like fate, like a customer, like losing a customer, and like some might see as failure, but you want to like, no, I want to know, like, I want to get in there, like, let's find out. I think that growth mindset in product management is like definitely important. I think it's something that I learned with in my family. You know, like my mom says, like, a door closes, like, honey, there's a window. And so I think that's valuable. Ray, do you have anything that you want to add
No, I think they touched on it both. When I think of product management, there's like three core things. One is that you're always asking why, and getting, because everyone says, oh, you start with a pain point, a problem, and then you get to the solution. But getting to that pain point and problem is very difficult. And they won't tell you what their problem is, and they're solving it a certain way today. So it's many layers of asking why. Then it's like being this master problem solver. Okay, now why, now that I know the why, the real why, and the jobs to be done and how they're solving it today, now like how do I problem solve quickly in an agile, lean manner so I can get some feedback really quickly. And then finally the empathy part, like how do I, they touch on all these things, like where you're putting yourself really in their shoes to understand those problem statements that they're feeling today. At Intel, we're a semiconductor company. We build a component within a solution. So we don't have the luxury of putting out an A/B test or getting a load of data from an end user. We're the value chain, we're a few tiers behind. So what we do to test is through agile methodology. We just put out like a low fidelity wireframe, and I talk to a few users or customers, and I try to figure out what's the minimal way for me to test certain components of this solution based on the problems that I heard from them in the past. So that's how we test. But yeah, they touch on everything else.
Yeah, love it.
Ray, I think you touched on something really critical for product management, and it's the whys, like the 5 whys and the curiosity. Sometimes people come, whether it's a business unit or individuals or customer feedback, with a solution to a certain problem, and you really have to dig deep to understand what truly is the underlying problem. What is the objective that's trying to be met? Because at face value, it sometimes isn't, what's coming directly to you as the initial request. So,
yeah. And that need to have versus want to have, like everyone has a solution today for the problem that they have, and it might be good enough. Like we don't need to throw technology at them. And I say that a lot to my engineers because they'll come with a solution that has everything under the sun. I'm like, yeah, that's great. They're solving it with like a person going out and looking at it instead of computer vision. Like, let's figure out how to really solve this within the business parameters too. So.
And if I could just add to that too, something else too that you guys both, this is a great group, but I kind of often see is solutions in search of a problem. A lot of times too, especially when you're dealing with stakeholders as you kind of get further in your career, a lot of times the folks who say, hey, come build this thing or help solve this thing, usually have sort of, not an agenda, that's too strong of a word, but they usually have like a very strong POV. And if they're subject matter experts, I'm all in, right? But in the PM world, I think it's important to ask those whys because, a lot of times what they think is a solution is something they saw a competitor do, or something they saw one partner do or one user do, and one isn't the market, right? And so that's something I learned early in the career too, is that usually when the person who comes in really excited with the solution, I'm super hesitant. It's like a red flag to me, because it's like, I don't really want to hear the solution. I want to hear the problem. I really want to deeply understand the problem, because I've been on so many wild goose chases building a thing, and then we launch it and just 2 lovely people are buying it. That's wonderful, but 2 lovely people do not build a company unless it's like a huge government contractor. So for sure, pushing on the whys and the whys and the whys, and also with you, like the engineer who comes in super excited on Monday morning with like, we're going to use computer vision to like solve doors, and like doors handled. We got that figured out, friend. Like, no reason to go down that route.
So Anthony, I love the point that you made, because I think oftentimes in my industry in biotech, there's a lot of subject matter experts, a lot of stakeholders that have like that scientific background that can be very intimidating, and like MD PhDs. And I'd love to know, like, how do you, like, once they've already, like, you've been brought in to like build a solution, like how do you fight it, or like how do you I guess like deal with that?
It's a really great question. So I keep 2 things front and center when I'm speaking with those folks. So first things first is they're trying to help. So I just kind of come in, yes, I understand 100%, but it's kind of, I forgot who said it. I want to say it was Albert Einstein or whatever it is, but it's rare that the system that created the problem has the solution to the problem, right? So the system that created the thing, the guy who's been in the company or the gal who's been at the company the last 16 years and has been doing business model A is rarely going to wake up one day and be super inspired to figure out a better way or a more efficient way or a clever way or a more delightful way to do it. So I understand they're coming from a good place, but what I'll always do is sort of bring them back to, okay, yep, I understand we've been doing it this way, and then a slight improvement on the mousetrap is really going to transform the business. It's going to increase sales a whole 10%. Delightful. But then I ask them, but is that what really is going to drive the industry forward, right? And you kind of keep bringing them, because that's usually what they're, at that level, what they're thinking about is driving the top line, like driving revenue. So I definitely want to keep them focused on their business goals. It's the easiest way to save you a lot of grief. So that's step one, right? Be very grateful. You're a subject matter expert. You've been in the industry forever and ever. But is that 10% transformation worth the next year and a half of work, right? Is this it? Is this what we want? Because then I'm down. I'm down with that, but let's be clear about what it is. The second thing I do, though, is bring in customers. There's nothing that'll shut somebody down who's been in the industry for a long time than saying, yep, we do it this way, we do it this way, we do it this way, and then bring in 3 junior folks from the client side, or 3 junior folks using the app for the first time, or 3 folks who sort of, not necessarily younger, but are in a different direction, and just have them interact. I really like the design thinking kind of framework for that, where you can sort of have everyone sort of broken up into groups. Sometimes if you can afford to do this and you have the resourcing, that's great. But you bring in 5 folks in the room and you give those folks the mic, right? You put the pro in the back, the expert, the queen, you put them in the back, and you basically let the folks who are new to the game or experiencing the product for the first time, who have extensive experience with the customer, speak to it. Or if you can't, you just grab a bunch of those anecdotes. So those are the 2 strategies, right? Like talk about, is this product or is this solution going to give us the transformation that you want, the transformation you brought this team in for? And the second part is just let the customer speak. Like just give them the mic, sit them in the back of the room and just say, we're just gonna be quiet for the next 5 hours and just hear them, let them bash our product, talk about how amazing the competitor is, talk about how, phones are dumb and Zoom is the way to go. And then just let that sort of break up the conversation. Okay, now we know that we're not the greatest thing since sliced bread or keto bread, whatever it is these days. So now that we know this, okay, what can we do to sort of address the concerns that they've talked about too? And then whenever they start, and it's gonna happen, the second they start drifting, be like, yeah, but is that what Monica said? Is that what Jeff said? Like you build those personas, but keep that persona, like I'm a fan of the persona. You can talk to anyone who's worked with me long enough. I bring the persona back, I beat people over the head with the personas. It's like, I don't think Monica said that. And it's not me saying it, it's this embodiment of Monica, which is wonderful.
This session feels very therapeutic. Like I have to say, refreshing like that. Ingrid or Ray, do you have anything to add? I think like the next thing I wanted to ask was also like just an example of a success of like identifying like the customer want versus the need, like separating the problem from the solution. I'd love to hear if you have any success story, but if you want to like comment on what Anthony just said and preach all of that.
Oh, I thought it was great. Right on the money. I think for me at different levels, it's the impact, focusing on the objective and the impact of what is going to get worked on, what's going to get built, as well as the opportunity costs. So if we go down this route, what are we leaving behind? What other options, what other opportunities are we leaving behind and off the table for our costs, our resources, whatever our constraints are. And that usually also drives prioritization of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to do. I'm not going to lie. I mean, when the stakeholder is the VP of my group, it's very difficult, but you hit it right on the head on the nail, or the nail on the head. I don't know, but when you bring in the customer, what I do is a lot of times bring in customer quotes, and because they can't be there in the room, and I'm like, oh, they said they didn't need a kiosk. That's not important, even though our business is about selling kiosks because it sells more compute. And the times that they seem shocked, I just continue to level it back to the customer journey or the customer insights. When it's on the engineering side, because product managers are trying to like convince everybody of staying focused on the problem statement. And with the engineers, I find if I probe when they build this solution that has a lot of different widgets, and maybe the widgets I believe are out of scope or won't be solving the problem. I'll just ask why, just like I would with a customer, out of curiosity, because what I found in product management and through life, even our backgrounds probably tell a lot to this. We all speak different languages, and there's always a reason. And we're all, I take this quote from one of my friends at Wayfair. She said her manager in engineering says, we're all smart. So like, what's the reason why we're thinking differently, and how do we get to an agreement? And so asking why, even with my stakeholders, it's more challenging when it's a VP, but even then it's like, oh, can you tell me a little bit more about your thought process? And then maybe circling back with some data.
Yeah, when it's definitely like someone from management, like the VP or the founder, like it is in my case, and it's like, oh, that's a tough battle. But nothing beats customer like insights, feedback, the data, bringing it back to the impact, the opportunity cost, what's gonna give, what's gonna not gonna give. So yeah, just to like finish up on this kind of like customer discovery journey, any successes that you wanna share really quickly, that you can share from previous experiences, would be great to hear. Like, we've heard about the struggle, let's hear about the success. There's no success. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll talk broadly, because I don't know what I'll talk broadly. So I think I didn't tell, we are predominantly building hardware, but this software side is new in that we're trying to influence the developer community to build off of Intel Silicon. And so even product management on the software side is very different than the product management that Intel normally does. So a success story, it's not exactly on a product, but a success story on transforming how we build products in general, software products, has been one that I can talk about. In our group, when I joined, my boss was of the lean methodology, but it was basically him alone. And I won't say him alone. He was the loudest voice on it. And a year and a half later, we're now, our entire group and all of IoT, including our president, really leans on lean, agile design thinking, like true product management processes and skills and thought process, which is Intel really started with always the solution, because we came with the silicon and we then gave it to our partners, and our partners put it into their PCs or whatever, their data centers, and we were building the future of it. And so it's been a shift of mindset, and I find that to be a success in itself. It's a small one, and every year I think we'll get better at building product that's actually solving a problem. But that mind shift in a company that's so big and pretty and has a lot of history, I think is a success story for me.
I think it's a big success. 100%. Changing people's minds is something very hard and difficult to do. And yeah. Okay, so I wanted to move on to talk more about like market entry. And so once, like we've just talked about, like really identifying the pain points of customers, like focusing on the problem, not the solution, and really like feeling the pain of the customer of like accomplishing a task or wanting to do something. Once we've identified that problem, like how do you go about deciding, like, is this a problem that we want to solve? If we want to solve it, does this mean us getting into a new market? Is this like us in our current market? Like, I guess like I want to understand more about like how that thought process goes for you, because you could identify a problem or like many problems, and how do you go about like prioritizing all of that, and like picking the one that is going to make your business line or your business successful?
I can give an example. I was brought back to WebMD to build out a new business vertical. And part of it was really establishing services around bridging the two main areas that WebMD owned, which was webmd.com, which is the consumer website, and medscape.com, which is the professional website. And creating an experience that leveraged both sides, which was providing the information around certain medical conditions, but also providing identification of the specialist or the type of doctors that would treat any particular condition. And so in order to narrow down and start building in an iterative process, we had to understand where the opportunities were to introduce this experience to consumers on the site. We had a directory that managed physicians, healthcare providers by specialties, and we had really built out a robust directory in terms of features and functionality. But in going through consumer interviews and going through the data, we identified that really the opportunity of making that connection was on the content pages, on specific overview and intro content pages for medical conditions, because that's the moment in time when people are coming to the site to learn about a recent diagnosis or a condition of a family or a friend. And that was the opportunity to start educating consumers about the type of specialists particular to those conditions and how to explore in a contextual basis. So based off of the condition, based off of the user's geographic location, and building out and beginning to build out the experience in that area of the site versus any other area, or adding more features and functionality to the directories. So for us, at that time, it was really looking at the demand, where the demand was and what the behaviors were, and thinking through what aligned with the mission of the company, which is to be able to serve people and help them take control of their medical care.
That's awesome. Love WebMD, by the way. I'm a hypochondriac, so all the time, just like, looking out what disease I may have. Anthony or Ray, do you want to jump in and share more about your thought process?
Sure. So I'm a little bit more old school. I agree with everything that was Ingrid said. I think one of the things that I do is sort of just look at sort of Porter's 5, right? So what's the marketplace? What's the number one seller in the company? What are the other products we have across our verticals? You know, how much headcount do we have to kind of put up against these goals? I think resourcing is a big sort of thing that I think about too, is like, how many engineers do we have who are experts in this space? Do we have time or space to sort of staff up to be able to go after some of these opportunities? But then things that are a little bit more externally looking is, you know, what are the competitors doing in the space? What's the landscape look like? It's fun if you have sort of a product marketing manager there to sort of help you understand sort of what thought leaders are saying in the space. I think all those things are things that are a little bit more intangible, but they're important in understanding sort of, you know, the phrase is overused, but I think it's still really valuable. Like, it's really useful to understand from competitors and from users and just the marketplace in general, even sort of supplemental goods or services, where the hockey puck is going, right? So a lot of times I think, you know, in PM, even as agile as we want to be, we're always sort of a couple of steps behind sort of where the state of the art is, unless you're the absolute leader in this space. So it's always good to know, okay, we're going to invest here. At the end of the year, we're not going to be first place. We're going to be somewhere between second place and 100th place. Are we okay committing for the next 4 or 5 years to get to this absolute goal? And then the second part is, do we as a company want to own this space, right? Do we understand what that means, right? Like, being, you know, it's like, again, I use a lot of platitudes, guys, so I apologize in advance, but I think they're just really helpful. It's sort of that 80-20 rule, right? If you're the 10th person in the market, going from 10 to 5, it's a lot of work for sure, but you're gonna be okay, right? Going from second place to first place, oh, that's the fight. Like, that's the one where you gotta put your head down for the next 5 years and really commit and really sort of understand where you wanna be. And I think that, like, that's a question about sort of stakeholder buy-in, right? Like, from talking to the finance team, talking to the sales teams, talking to your leadership teams, and making sure, like, and that's as a product manager, you need to come in and say, here's what we understand about the consumer, here's what we understand about our product, and here's what we understand about the competitor. This is sort of a diagram here. Here's what we think it'll take, right? And that's when you do that 3 or 5 or 6 year roadmap. And that's what sort of drives those conversations for me and where I'm at and the way I like to work. And sort of bringing all those elements together, then that's when you make the decision, right? Like, once you kind of can scope out, here's where the market is now, here's where the market will be in 5 years, here's what we think will be in 3 years, here's what revenue will look like, here's what engagement will look like, here's what the consumer might sound like. is this a state that we like, right? And we obviously get it wrong all the time. I'm proud to say that I get it wrong 90% of the time, but at least it's helpful, right? So that finance can be like, 2 years from now, when you miss a ton of goals, you can be like, remember when I said there was like a margin of error? So I think like understanding that vision and painting that vision really helps out, but then also couching it in sort of what competitors are doing, what sales is telling you, really important. And then also what consumers are at, that makes a decision, right? Because then it's easier for sort of whoever the leadership is to say, you know what, Anthony, go for it. Yes, that's a great place. That's where we want to be. Or, you know what, not worth it. It really takes away from our core business. You can nix that. And sort of that's how I sort of drive those conversations.
Yeah, I think something that you reminded me of is just like sometimes like the best product management decisions are like the no's. It's just like, no, this is like we don't need to build more. We don't need to do more. Just like, no. Ray, I don't know if you want to add anything else, but I think one of the things that you also made me think about was just like, I often find myself just like gathering all sorts of data and just like feel like an octopus almost. And I guess I'm curious about like, how do you stay sane, especially during this time? So just like, there's so much information, there's so much like qualitative, quantitative, like customer interviews and sales team feedback. How do you bring it all together and try to stay as like unbiased as possible and just present the information objectively? Right, I don't know if you want to.
Well, there was a lot in that question. So how do I'll start. Tell me if I didn't answer it all. But how do I grab this octopus and how do I stay, I guess, focused? I use a lot of tools. There's so many tools out there to organize myself: Asana, Trello, Mural for brainstorming. And so I use those along the way. And I also go through the lean methodology. You were talking, Anthony, and it reminded me, this is a little bit old school, but with a twist. So the lean canvas is like the old school, a twist on the old school business canvas. And I love the lean canvas because it maps out really quickly. Here are our hypotheses, our assumptions. Let's not take a lot of time here, because we don't know the answers. And especially in my team, we're doing emerging tech, we mostly don't. And then let's test it. And so that's a really great tool to keep me focused. Like the lean canvas starts with a problem statement, and then there's a methodology on how you go through, and it ends it with revenue, which market modeling for emerging markets is also really hard. But anyways, you just put your assumptions there. And it's also, to Anthony's point, it's something on paper that you can go back to and say, we had these hypotheses here. Now we have this user data, and now we have these new hypotheses. So like documenting a lot of things, or almost everything, and making sure everyone is on the same page with you. So having those stand-up meetings, having a stakeholder meeting, maybe once a month, whatever the cadence is for your company, and making sure that everyone understands the data that you're getting. For me, it's messy in between, but when I have those meetings, I'm like, shoot, I have to make this clean and concise and do it in 30 minutes for someone that doesn't know the sector and doesn't have time to listen to me. And that really forces me to use all these cool tools that are out there to make it clean. But in between, I'm like maybe a little bit of a hot mess. I don't know, but and I guess, and you said something else about not being biased.
Yeah, trying to just like bring in all the information and be as objective as possible. Like I often find myself that I just like have this like hunch and this intuition, which is like, I don't think that's the way that we should be going, or like at least like not now. Like how do you like leverage that with just like trying to put like all the information out there to present to the engineering team, to management, to anybody in the most objective way, and allow them to interpret it. I guess, yeah.
I think that part is like with data, and it doesn't need to be like, it's the data that you're collecting from the customers. It's not you. So keeping your voice out of it and saying, this is facts, or these are facts that I'm finding. And let's make an educated assumption on what the next step should be, or what we need to prioritize in terms of features and stuff. I think that's always helpful in those conversations, and making it really clean and really concise, because no one outside of you is so passionate about this problem that you're trying to solve. And so like I'm always trying to up level it. And luckily, my verticals are retail, banking, hospitality, and education is my passion. But I don't always work in that. And I'd be a little more biased there. But in the other sectors, I'm like, oh, okay, like this isn't exact. I don't have that much passion. So it helps me be also subjective, but I don't know if that helps for the two of you that might be following your passion all the time in product management. I'm sure you veer on putting some of your subjectivity in there. I don't know.
That's an interesting, I mean, yeah, please feel free to comment, but I never thought about, like, I'm in biotech in the field of genetics and I feel really passionate about that. And so, yeah, sometimes like you have to like, I don't want to say check your passion, but kind of like bring it back and 100%, like, I don't know about Ingrid and.
Oh, I let my passion fuel me. So I am in health and wellness, and I just grab at everything that I can to make the right decisions. So for me, it's not so much about to push what I think or my bias or my preference, but rather any decision that I've made. For example, my current job is at Able2, which is around behavioral health, mental health. And any decision we make, the objective is to provide the best services and treatments for our participants for their benefit. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I'm super passionate about that. I'm super passionate about making sure we're making the right decisions that represent the benefit, not just to one particular population, but to all our users. And so I just let that fuel me to go down every single rabbit hole that I can to make sure that we are making the best decision that aligns with our mission and aligns with our end goal.
Yeah. That's awesome that you're in that specific field, especially like during these times. I think it's like mental health is like hugely important. Anthony, I don't know if you have anything else to add to the.
I also think I let my passions fuel me, but I'm also trying to be really careful about getting too caught up. Early on in the career, I used to do that. I think two things that I keep in mind is, one is strong opinions loosely held. So like have your strong POV, like, oh, this is the way to go. Like this is going to help save kids and this will help, put people on the moon or whatever it is. But the minute you see a data point that challenges that, back off, right? Like then explore that, because that means an assumption is wrong somewhere. So I think that's one thing that I like to keep in mind. And then the second part of it too, and this is actually what my training from sales. That's why I think it's a benefit in a lot of ways, my background and also my Latino upbringing too in a Dominican household. For sure is you might think you're right, but if mom says right, then we're going left, right? Or rather, if mom says left, we're going left and that's it, right? So the way that sort of translates to me is the customer is always right. So you might think that this is the way to do it, but there's 1,000 ways up the mountain. And if the customer is telling you left, then left, right? Like, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit before. Like you want to skate to where the hockey puck will be, not where it is, for sure. But sometimes what you think is the right path is not the preferred path for the user, just because of what's in the industry, what they're seeing, some sort of artifacts they've seen from some other technologies, like, oh, well, we like the button to look like this, or we like the functionality to look like this, or we want the workflow to go like that. So sure, have your feedback, but then that's also why I like A/B testing as much as possible. Like I'm gonna hold on really fiercely to my point of view, but I'm also gonna put a lot of sort of trial balloons ahead of me just to be sure that like we're going in the right way. And I wanna be really focused on stuff that like, I don't wanna commit too far to a certain direction without at least having a couple of data points to sort of steady my way. Like if I'm taking a super leap and it might be something where I'm gonna catch all the egg on my face, then I'm 100% gonna hold back on that decision and really sort of figure out can we do like a quick little mock-up? Can we do sort of an MVP? Can we do like a super light like focus group and just figure it out before you go so far? So I always couch that, because the fear, I think people get really passionate until that one time you get slammed in the face, right? Where like you go super hard on like a product decision and you think you've solved life, like, and then you get it, no one buys your thing, finance is looking at you and everyone's like, well, okay, so you let down the company for the year. Obviously not speaking from personal experience, I'm working through therapy. So I think that's one of the things that kind of couches that passion, right? Is like getting hit hard in the face, like you don't want that to happen. but then two, the customer's always right. So like, I mean, you're a pizza place and you might make pizza and you think it's the best pizza under the sun, but if no one buys pizza for the first 4 weeks, friends, sell something else, right? Like, unless, you know what I mean? Don't die on that cross, right? Like, hold your opinions, but then be ready to change when the data says otherwise.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to like listen within and then like also like listen outside. You have to like check in with yourself to make sure that you're checking your, I want to say the passion, like I think like words like maybe your ego even at some point, and then also like listen on the outside and just like adapt. And like I think that as Latinos, like it's what we do, we adapt to the circumstances. So yeah, and I just like wanted to comment on Ray bringing us on Lean Canvas back. It was just like it's a good one. It's a good tool. It's like almost like a good old reggaeton song. It's like an oldie but a goodie. So like you're gonna re-listen. You're gonna go back to it. You're gonna like the memories, the excitement about product management is gonna come back. So I love Lean Canvas. Okay, so and I think like before I like jump into my next question, I was just curious to learn like how have you managed to do your job during like in this remote environment that we're in? Has it been challenging? Has it been just about like the same? I think a lot of product management is like a lot of like relationship management. So it's like a lot of like interpersonal, like reading like people's like body language and like how has it been just like managing your teams, your everything?
I mean, I think you touched on the relationship piece, which is my company is hybrid. So we do have offices, but we also have a lot of remote workers. And so thankfully that virtual relationship is not something new and we've been able to manage through. But I do think it's something as a person managing multiple people, it's front of mind for me to make sure we're balancing that relationship, checking in on individuals, as well as making sure we're moving forward as a company and we're able to focus on work, not at the expense of any individual.
Mm-hmm.
We at Intel, it's very much a culture of it was always face-to-face. Luckily, my role was remote. My team's in Arizona, so I was traveling there twice a month. Pre-COVID, and it was tiring, but it was something that I felt like I needed to do. And I was trying to pitch these different tools that now we use all the time for virtual brainstorming. And it was definitely tough, but now using tools like a Mural, I have to shout out a lot. I know other people use different tools and there's a lot out there, but this tool is a virtual whiteboard where you have sticky notes and brainstorming and even doing personas and visual work as a team just brings an excitement that I feel like even face to face is almost better, because then you capture all your data all at once, opposed to like in person where you have to take pictures of your post-its. And so for me, it's been using these tools, not just to guide me, but also to empower my team and I to feel close and know that there's other ways of communicating opposed to what we did pre-COVID of face-to-face. And then the mental health part, which I think always just checking in on a human basis. There's a lot going on right now in this world, in this country, and it's not easy. And I always bring my authentic self to work, and I'm that empathy part. And I think that comes from my background of knowing what struggle is and being there when, things are rough, and knowing that everyone has something going on behind closed doors. I have that in the back of my mind. And so I always just do a mental a check-in, like, how are you doing, and a personal level. And sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable for people, but for me, I'm kind of like, this is how I am. I have always been this way, and so I will be that way now. And I think that helps. But I think those are the things that I've been using here. And I mess up a lot too. I've been messing up along the way too. So I love to learn from the rest of you too on the tools that you're using or strategies.
It's impossible not to make mistakes as human, and especially during this time. So I love the mural tip. Like, I'm gonna check it out. It's one of the things that I hadn't heard of. Anthony, anything that you wanna add how you've been doing? And
Sure. I think it's a really big challenge. I think that I'm really excited to see what the next couple of years looks like, because for years and years, people have been sort of promoting remote work. And so this is like the biggest case study, global case study ever, unfortunately under terrible circumstances, but I think it's really going to transform work. I think for me, one thing I've noticed for myself is I'm just working a lot longer and harder than I'm used to. Sorry, of course everyone wants to ping me, right? Now's the time, guys. So I think one of the big things for me is sort of pulling back, giving myself sort of the hard stops, like at a certain point, just turn it off, because work is home now. So being better about that, and also just across the team, like when people take their day off, don't ping them, don't email them. Before it was sort of okay, like, you know, it was a real emergency. Now I really try to honor that. And then the second portion of it too is absolutely pinging people, like just checking in with them. Hey, everything okay? Or what I try to do is an out sheet, like somebody will be like, oh yeah, I'm taking vacation time, I'm going to a park, I'm going to whatever. My next dialogue with that person, hey, how was that trip? What did you go? Like spend time, like get to know the person, because now we don't have those interpersonals as a PM. Now it's really rough, because you're right, I can't read body language. But if I can understand sort of what's going on underneath the hood, I could be like, when I shared that document with you, I didn't get any feedback for like 2-3 weeks. You know, is there something going on, right? Like, don't worry about the feedback. Like, it's something going on in personal life that's sort of holding that up. Because if that's the case, then I could figure this part out, but we got to make sure that you're okay, because we're all sort of we're definitely on a team together. So those are the things I'm trying to do. Sort of hard stops, like X, Y, and Z clock stops, like just close the laptop. Step away, you know, it is what it is. Fortunately, the world of work is going to move on whether you're there or not. So just having that mental break, checking in with folks for sure. And then just following up, right? Like, hey, you took that trip to whatever it is, or you try to cook that recipe over the weekend. How was it? The kids love it, blah, 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 blah. Like digging deep on that, just because we don't have those water cooler conversations anymore. And that's how you build a camaraderie, especially for new folks too, who've been hired during the pandemic too, because the only thing they've seen is this square box, right? Or this rectangle for the last 4 or 5 months, you know?
Yeah. And Anthony, now that you're in Miami, have you been hitting up the beach? I don't even know if it's like the beaches are open, but have you enjoyed your time?
In the beginning, they kept the beaches open, probably to our detriment. And now I think they're starting to open them up. What I've been doing is a lot of walks around sort of the neighborhood. I'll go early in the morning to kind of the beach, and that's like an amazing moment for me. It's just like early in the morning before there's a million people there, just go and just walk. No agenda in mind, like I'll just walk to a certain point and that's it. I'll just call it like an hour or so before the meeting or before I have to sort of hop on. But yeah, I've been trying to like get out as much as possible. One thing that I got a tip from my manager too is if you're doing these Zoom calls, take it just on audio and take a walk and talk. Because it just breaks up the rhythm of the day, lets you get some fresh air. And the other thing too, I read some weird article too, that this is like a cognitive load, like, cause some people end up staring at themselves, or you're trying to like read body language and your brain's like, this is weird, something's going on. So like, I've done it a couple of times where I just like shut down all the visuals and it was just like take it like a phone call. And then my manager was like, he's just walking outside. And I'm like, that's a clutch move. Like, I'm going to try to do that. I don't quite trust myself to be that far away from the computer, but I want to challenge myself to sort of just take 1 or 2 meetings just walking and just seeing if that sort of brings energy back.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I've also found that like now I'm looking forward to Fridays. I'm just like, I got 2 days just for myself. Like I try to do no work, even on Sunday afternoon. I'm just like, no, Roxanne, like Monday, that's when the week starts. And I try to like finish around like 5, 6, 7 and just like really trying to honor like my time, because it's like, yeah, sometimes like I have to like remind myself, like I need to leave. I need to like be outside. Great. Okay. So I think like I just like have one last question. I think we have like 10 minutes left, but I really wanted to talk about, bring it back again to product management, and wanted to talk about like growth opportunities and how you currently like, how do you use your current product to identify like new growth channels? And if you had like any like quick ways to assess, it's like, oh, there's like something here. Like, how do you how do you do that? It's like, oh, this is interesting data point, and like, because I also heard this and that, and like, we should further investigate. Like, if you have any quick ways to do that.
So I can answer from previous experience at a different company. I worked in an e-commerce site, and the easiest and fastest way I ever got insights into new opportunities was through a feedback link on the site itself. It's amazing what individuals, if there's an easy opportunity to provide feedback, both positive and negative, they will provide it, and just gained so much insight from that. The most simple tool on the site for that. At my current company, I think it's a little different. We're dealing with a very different space. It's very important that we're making sure we're always approaching everything with an evidence-based approach. And so the insights have come from different areas. It's the same idea of just an opportunity for feedback, but it's really been with our partners or with our clients, and understanding all the asks and where we are aligned, and where the pattern of asks and requests and customizations come in, and that signaling opportunities in the market and exploring that further.
Yeah.
I think for me, what I've been doing is doubling down on, I've always tried to do this, is double down on the power users, and then double down on the folks who disappear, the churn folks. So that's always a great way to sort of understand, why you lost business, but more importantly, where the market's going, or what are so now that we've solved this problem for user A, what are you now doing now that you have this extra time, this extra resourcing, this extra efficiency back? And they'll be like, oh, well, we did this so that we could have this. Like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty closely related to that. Are there any other service providers that sort of do something similar, and sort of figuring out if it's worth bridging that gap? Or the other side of it is, okay, now that you have A is now going a lot faster, but all you're trying to do is get A to B. Can we now be B, right? Like, yep, we got this link launch, we got this service launch, you got this reporting, and you use this reporting to make purchasing decisions. Well, now can we help you make those purchasing decisions? So it's always great to sort of talk to the power users, because they're the ones who are sort of thinking, if you're thinking 5 years ahead, they're 10 years ahead, they're 12 years ahead. And they're super adopters, and they have a really strong POV. So it's always great to sort of like double down and to hear what they're saying. And then the churn folks, right? Like, that's always a great understanding of, okay, so, you've built your segments, you have your 5 segment of users, and all, of your 5 segments, all 4 of them are running this way, but 1 segment's running over this way. That's a business, right? That's an extra service, that's a sweetener, that's something that you can kind of chase. And if there's similar enough products, you can do sort of, you can kind of split the branch really quickly and build sort of a special workflow for them, and see if that helps grow the business. So that's one thing I always do. Power users, your churn folks, and then figuring out your segmentation and who you have a good hold on, and who's sort of running off the side, and just figuring out, okay, where is that customer going? Where are they getting their services? Where are they getting their supplies?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, the both of you touched on almost everything that we try to do, or I try to do as well. Something unique about our group is the emerging technology side, where we're constantly building these rapid prototypes for things of the future. And I think this is where I go back to what I said before, which I didn't always need to do, but following your passion. For education is one of our verticals. I'm very passionate about that sector. So I subscribe to almost every newsletter, every VC person. I follow people on LinkedIn in the ed tech space like no other. And so always just keeping a pulse on what's there. Do I see trends across different newsletters, different articles, the world, and just always having that passion in the back of my mind and keeping a pulse on it helps with building out growth in emerging technology. Like what do I see coming? And so the passion helps. And when I'm on a vertical that I don't know much about and I don't have a passion for, then I also subscribe to every newsletter. Like I'm following the quick service restaurant right now industry. And so I don't particularly have a passion in that space, but I now know everything there is to know about the quick service restaurant space. And then I couple that with other things of futuristic looking. So if you're a company looking at emerging tech and like what the future is, it's always just helpful to get an overload of information and become kind of this expert from secondary research and then do the primary research, of course, and talking to people experts out in the field. I do that a lot too for the passion stuff for education. I'm constantly talking to people in the space who know about education, who are out in the field, doing it every day. And I couple that with the technology that I know Intel has that could possibly help.
Awesome. So like follow, subscribe, tweet, all of that.
I don't tweet, but yeah, do it.
Okay, so to close up, I know I said like the last question was a close up, but you know, I feel like we're Latinos, Latinas, we could all stay here talking every day, like, but I just wanted to close up to see if you have any, you know, general advice for anybody who wants to like get into product management, any recommendation, or if not, like any book recommendation. It doesn't have to be about product management or business. It can be just like about like life or anything that you've read or seen that has been helpful to you in your career or during these times. I'd love to hear.
Sure, I have a couple. Sorry guys to drone on for a bit, but first things first, I would say machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's the beast. That's the next wave for sure. Hardware and all that for sure, but I think that underpinning it, a lot of it's going to be machine learning. So for folks who are sort of thinking about the space, think about maybe taking a couple of courses or a Udemy course in data analytics or data science or machine learning, just an intro course. You don't need to learn how to code in Python. You just need to understand how these systems and these agents work. The next thing I would sort of say is particularly around an industry, if you really like it, particularly if you're interested in product management. Like there's a product manager who's just really technically strong, and then there's product managers who have a really strong vision. It's okay to pursue being a subject matter expert, right? Like if you are interested in fashion, to kind of borrow an example from earlier, it's okay to like really double down, learn the industry really well, because that's just gonna make you that much better as a product manager. And then the last bit of it, a book that I've been reading recently, it's really great, and I forgot the author's name, she's fantastic, Build Better Products. It's a great book, it's just a great refresher on just, you know, understanding your customer, understanding what you're trying to build, making sure you're building the right tool sets to sort of encompass what the users need and making sure it's the strongest thing to come to market, and then building that virtuous cycle. And then just a framework that I like besides, you know, Scrum and all that other stuff is Sarah Tavel's hierarchy of engagement. I think if you're trying to build anything to grow, because now PMs are growth hackers also, I think you really got to make sure you're understanding that you bring somebody to the house, but then you got to keep them there. And I think she has a fantastic framework for how you keep users on your site and you keep delighting them.
Mm-hmm. Ingrid, or yeah, right.
So some advice, I have gone into different careers, and you probably both have felt this too, where everyone has said it's really difficult to get in, and you're probably not going to get there. And I have proven wrong on almost everything through my life. I almost like doing that. And so if someone tells you it's really hard to get in product management because you need this technical skill or you need an MBA, just don't listen to them. They're not the right person, it's not the right company. And move forward and go to somewhere else, because anyone could be a product manager. You just need to get maybe some skills under your belt. You don't need an MBA. You don't need a CS degree. You just need to be hungry. There are a lot of free courses out there, Coursera. There's a lot of great boot camps. I've taken them myself through General Assembly. There's a bunch of others. Those cost a little bit more, but they're worth it. And so just I think my biggest advice is just don't listen to the people that say no to you, because they're short-sighted and they don't know that you can do it. And reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you, especially if you're Latino, and help any way that I can. It's either connecting you or informational interviews, because sometimes it's just getting your foot in the door, I think or through the window, and you need an advocate or sponsor. And I think everyone has that story, but somehow they forget, and they becoming this expert, and they know almighty of something, and it's just not true. And I am a product of that. So please reach out to me if you need help.
Love it. Don't listen to the haters, basically.
No. Well, they might not be haters. They just, maybe that's what they've gone through all life. But as a product manager, you're asking why, like, why can't I do that? And so ask the why, and they'll tell you probably something that isn't concrete, or maybe something that you need to build up, but yeah, you can do it.
Why is our favorite question. Yeah. Ingrid, what about you? Any book recommendations or?
I don't have any book recommendations, but I have to echo curiosity. Like, if you are interested in something, dig into it. We have so much at our disposal now through the internet, through online courses, and don't shy away from reaching out to people, learning about something, asking questions. We hold ourselves back so many times versus anyone else holding us back by just not doing, by just not reaching out. So I would encourage everyone who has any interest in anything in your career, in your personal life, curiosity, and just not holding yourself back.
Yeah, I love it. And I think if this session is testament to anything, like, I think we Latinas make great product managers because of our different backgrounds and our different ways that we can empathize with the customer, with other people who are not seeing eye to eye. And yeah, like, we're a natural octopus, trying to navigate in life in this country, our families and work and careers. So yeah, thank you all for joining me here. This was the Business of Tech session of LTX Fest 2020. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, guys.